In this video, we are going to take a look at the movie Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and talk about its storyline. In this video, we will talk about the movie Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. We'll go through the storyline, take a look at the cast and characters, and also discuss how the movie was produced and how it performed at the box office. At the end, we'll share some reviews along with our personal thoughts about the film. So let's begin. First, let's look at the movie's box office results. Many film titles received updates, including Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which earned around $24 million worldwide in its opening. Within the first 5 minutes, we also mentioned Guardians of the Galaxy, which added about $33 million. Other movies released around the same time include Into the Storm, Step Up All In, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, Neighbors, and The Purge, Anarchy. There were also major titles such as How to Train Your Dragon 2, X-Men, Days of Future Past, and Transformers, which continued performing strongly at the box office. We have just received Sony's final numbers for Sex Tape and 22, Jump Street, which were updated shortly after 3 p.m. Later, in the second Sunday update at around 2 p.m., we also added the opening numbers for Into the Storm along with about 15 more titles from studios like Universal, Fox, and Warner Brothers. One of the major films included is Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, which opened at number 1 in the German market. The movie has not yet been released in China, but it has already surpassed the lifetime gross of Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Meanwhile, Disney has crossed the $2 billion mark in international box office revenue. The studio also has another film earning more than $500 million internationally. In the UK, the comedy sequel 22, Jump Street has become the biggest opening of the year, earning about $4.5 million during its debut weekend and reaching a total of $20.9 million. This performance slightly edges past Transformers 4, though only by a small margin. There will not be a separate detailed breakdown this time, but highlights from China, Korea, and Japan have been included. Local films in these regions are already performing strongly and attracting large audiences this weekend. After an impressive performance, the film has now reached around $946 million worldwide, following a strong $65 million domestic weekend. Meanwhile, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles debuted at number 1 in 19 international markets, including major regions like Russia and Mexico, earning about $9.29 million overall. In Russia, the movie opened at number 1 with $1.1 million, performing about 13% higher than Dawn of the Planet of the Apes and nearly doubling the previous number 1 film in that market. At the same time, Guardians of the Galaxy continued its strong run during its second weekend in Mexico, opening at number 1 with an impressive $7.1 million from 630 locations. This result even beat last weekend's opening of Guardians of the Galaxy, which earned around $6.5 million. Another highlight is the franchise's performance in Japan, where it also debuted at number 1. As for Guardians of the Galaxy, the film has now collected over $313 million worldwide since its release. Domestically, it has earned about $176 million after this weekend. During this weekend alone, the movie added $41 million across more than 50 markets. However, it still has several major releases ahead in big territories such as China, Spain, France, Germany, Italy, and Japan. Because of this, the film continues to perform strongly around the globe, with Russia and the UK currently standing as its strongest markets. So far, the film has earned around $23 million and $22 million in different international territories. In Russia, the movie has already surpassed the earnings of Captain America, The Winter Soldier, the first Captain America, and even the first Iron Man, which is quite an impressive achievement. In Australia, the film also debuted at number 1, earning about $6 million, while earlier previews had already collected around $8.2 million. The movie is scheduled to open in France and Spain next weekend, while the release in China is expected later on October 10th. Meanwhile, Guardians of the Galaxy continues to perform strongly worldwide. Its IMAX earnings have already reached around $30 million, including about $3 million from 16 IMAX screens internationally. At the same time, Warner Brothers' film Into the Storm faced tough competition from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in Russia and debuted at number 3 in that market. Looking at the updated box office numbers, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles has now earned around $94 million worldwide, while Guardians of the Galaxy has added another $33 million globally. Other films currently in theaters include Into the Storm, Step Up All In, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, Neighbors, The Purge, Anarchy, How to Train Your Dragon 2, X-Men, Days of Future Past, and Transformers, Age of Extinction. Sony has also released final numbers for Sex Tape and 22 Jump Street, which were updated later in the afternoon. During the second Sunday update, more than 15 additional titles from studios like Universal, Fox, and Warner Brothers were included in the box office report. One of the highlights is Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, which opened at number 1 in Germany. The film has not yet been released in China, but it has already surpassed the lifetime earnings of Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Disney has now crossed the $2 billion mark in international box office revenue and also has another film earning over $500 million internationally. In the United Kingdom, the comedy sequel 22 Jump Street became the biggest opening of the year, earning about $4.5 million and reaching a total of $20.9 million, slightly beating Transformers 4. During the latest weekend update, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles debuted at number 1 in 17 out of 19 international markets, including Russia and Mexico, earning around $29 million. In Russia, the movie opened with $11 million, which is about 13% higher than Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, nearly doubling the second-place film in the market. Meanwhile, Guardians of the Galaxy also performed strongly in Mexico, opening at number 1 and earning $7.1 million from 658 locations, beating its earlier opening numbers. Another major success is Transformers, Age of Extinction, which has now become the 9th highest-grossing film of all time, earning more than $1 billion worldwide after adding about $17 million from 58 international markets. The movie also opened in its final major territories, Japan and Spain. In Japan, the film debuted as the number 1 U.S. title, earning about $6.4 million from 307 locations, showing a 10% increase compared to previous openings. Finally, let's talk about the fan reaction to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Movie fans are often very passionate when their favorite characters are redesigned. The rebooted version of the Ninja Turtles introduced a new look for the characters. Early promotional material revealed the updated designs of Leonardo and Donatello, giving fans their first detailed look at the new turtles. However, when the teaser trailer was released, it sparked a lot of discussion among fans. Some viewers were excited to see a modern version of the characters, while others criticized the new designs and changes to the classic look of the turtles. One of the biggest topics of discussion among fans was the decision to give the Ninja Turtles more human-like facial features. Many longtime followers of the franchise started debating whether this design choice would work well or not. Some fans believed that making the turtles look more realistic could help the movie feel more grounded and believable in a live-action setting. However, others were worried that changing their appearance too much might move the characters too far away from the classic comic and cartoon versions that people had loved for decades. Because of these concerns, the teaser trailer quickly became the center of attention. Fans carefully watched every scene, analyzing the designs and comparing them to earlier versions of the characters. The creative team behind the film had already shared a detailed breakdown of the teaser trailer, explaining some of the artistic choices. Later on, another trailer was released through the movie's official Facebook page. This new trailer reused much of the same footage and narration but included additional angles and clearer shots, allowing fans to get a much better look at each member of the team. From these trailers, it became very clear that the turtles were designed with more detailed and human-like faces than in previous adaptations. Their expressions were more realistic, their skin textures looked more natural, and their overall appearance was meant to blend better with the live-action world around them. At first, some of the early concept designs sounded unusual and even a little risky. But once audiences saw the characters fully animated in the film's action scenes, many people realized that the designs actually worked better than expected. Fans of comic book characters can be extremely passionate, especially when their favorite heroes are redesigned for a new generation. The same thing happened with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Even though the turtles are mutated reptiles, many fans still expect them to look a certain way based on the original comics and animated series. Because of that, any major change to their design quickly becomes a topic of debate within the fan community. The newer trailers also revealed several other important details. For example, fans were finally able to see Shredder's updated armor design, which looked much more mechanical and powerful than earlier versions. The trailers also provided clear views of the main turtles, including Leonardo, Raphael, and Donatello, giving audiences a better idea of how each character would appear in the film. Most of the criticism surrounding the movie actually began after the very first teaser trailer was released. That short preview raised many questions about how much the story and characters had been changed. Some fans worried that the filmmakers might move too far away from the original source material. Others were willing to give the new version a chance, hoping that the spirit of the classic Ninja Turtles story would still remain intact. For several months leading up to the release, the reboot stayed in the spotlight. The movie was produced by Michael Bay and directed by Jonathan Liebesman, and both names brought a lot of attention to the project. Some creative decisions became controversial among fans. One of the biggest discussions involved the casting of Megan Fox as April O'Neil, since she had previously worked with Michael Bay on the Transformers films. There were also rumors about changes to the Turtles' origin story, as well as the possibility of giving the characters a more modern and updated style. Because of all these rumors and speculations, fans remained uncertain about what the final movie would actually look like. Even just a week before the film was released in theaters, many viewers were still asking questions about the main villain and the overall direction of the story. Some people wondered whether William Fichtner's character would turn out to be the primary antagonist, while others were curious about the exact role of Shredder and his powerful armored suit. When Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, 2014, finally arrived in theaters, many of those questions were finally answered. The film introduced a slightly different version of the Turtles' origin story while still keeping several familiar elements from the classic franchise. In this story, the Turtles, Leonardo, Raphael, Donatello, and Michelangelo, were originally part of a scientific experiment involving a special mutagen. During the experiments, they were cared for and studied as test subjects. Over time, the mutagen caused them to transform into large, intelligent humanoid turtles with incredible strength and agility. Meanwhile, April O'Neil, a journalist working for Channel 6 News, begins investigating strange criminal activities taking place across the city. Her search for answers eventually leads her to the mysterious organization known as the Foot Clan, which is responsible for a growing wave of crime and chaos. As April continues her investigation, she discovers something surprising. These powerful crime-fighting turtles were actually once the same pets she had known during her childhood. They had been connected to her father's scientific research, which explains how they became part of the experiment that changed their lives forever. Soon, April finds herself caught in the middle of a dangerous conflict between the Foot Clan and the newly formed team of turtle heroes. Together with the turtles, she works to uncover the truth behind the experiments and stop the villains threatening the city. Although the 2014 version of April O'Neil still follows the familiar idea of a reporter uncovering a major story, the film adds a new twist by giving her a childhood connection with the turtles. This change was introduced to create a stronger emotional bond between the characters and make the story feel more personal. In many versions of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles universe, April's father either disappears or dies early in the story. However, some adaptations explore his character in greater detail. For example, in the 2012 animated series, Dr. O'Neill appears as a scientist studying unusual mutations and strange biological experiments. In that version of the story, He works closely with research involving mysterious alien technology before eventually becoming involved in the larger conflict that brings April and the Turtles together. Furthermore, this is not the first time that writers of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles franchise have connected April O'Neil with the scientific community. In earlier versions of the comic book series and even in the 1980s animated show, April was shown working for a time as a research assistant to Dr. Baxter Stockman, long before she became widely known as a television news reporter. In some versions of the story, she even played a key role in naming the four turtles themselves. As mentioned earlier, in the film the Ninja Turtles and Splinter begin their lives as ordinary test subjects involved in a mutagen experiment stored in an attic laboratory. It is April and her father, Dr. O'Neil, who eventually give the turtles their famous names. Inspired by the names of Renaissance artists, the turtles are identified and marked with small touches of color, purple, blue, orange, and red, so that each one can be recognized individually. These colors later become the iconic bandanas associated with each turtle's personality. After the experiments are exposed and the laboratory is abandoned, the Turtles and Splinter are removed from Dr. O'Neil's lab and eventually end up living hidden away in the New York City sewer system. Following the example of Dr. O'Neil, who always cared deeply for his daughter, Splinter begins raising the mutated turtles as if they were his own sons. In order to keep them safe, Splinter forbids Leonardo, Raphael, Donatello, and Michelangelo from going above ground into the dangerous streets of New York City. However, as the turtles grow older, they become increasingly restless and curious about the human world. Wanting to protect his sons and prepare them for any dangers they might face, Splinter begins studying martial arts. According to the story, Splinter discovers a discarded martial arts training book and begins teaching himself the techniques described in it. Over time, he becomes highly skilled and disciplined, eventually passing these teachings and values on to the turtles. Under his guidance, the turtles train for years, mastering martial arts and developing into the heroes that fans recognize today as the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Even though they are trained warriors, the turtles still struggle with their curiosity about the world above them. While Splinter is away dealing with the growing threat of the Foot Clan, the turtles secretly leave the sewer to explore the city. During one of these outings, they are eventually discovered by April O'Neil, who is working on a report about unusual events happening across New York. Although early rumors suggested that the 2014 reboot might introduce an entirely alien origin story for the Turtles, the final version of the film actually stays fairly close to the traditional backstory. In most versions of the TMNT mythology, the Turtles are created after accidental exposure to a mysterious mutagen known as TCRI, rather than through a carefully planned scientific experiment. Even though the film makes some adjustments to the details, the overall concept still remains familiar to longtime fans. The turtles are mutated creatures who grow into powerful fighters, and their personalities are highlighted through their visual designs and individual characteristics, something that goes beyond just the color of their headbands. However, the biggest difference in the new film involves Splinter's backstory. In many classic versions of the story, Splinter's past is directly connected to the rise of Shredder, one of the turtles' greatest enemies. In the original comic series, Splinter was the pet rat of a skilled ninja named Hamato Yoshi in Japan. Yoshi was eventually hunted down and killed by a rival warrior. Before that tragedy occurred, the rat had already observed and copied many of Yoshi's martial arts movements while watching his training sessions. As a result, after the mutagen transformed him into a humanoid rat, Splinter already possessed a surprising understanding of martial arts techniques. Once mutated, Splinter began training the turtles as his students, teaching them discipline, loyalty, and the importance of fighting for justice. Over time, the turtles became heroic warriors dedicated to protecting the city from criminals and dangerous enemies. For a long time, fans also wondered about the identity of Shredder in the rebooted movie. Some early comments from actor William Fichtner led people to believe that the character Oroku Saki might not appear in the film at all. However, once the movie was released in theaters, it became clear that Shredder is indeed present and remains the iconic armored villain inside the powerful metal suit. Even so, very little detail is given about this version of Oroku Saki's backstory, leaving some aspects of the character mysterious. For more than 2 years, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles reboot remained a controversial project among fans. When it was first announced that Megan Fox had been cast as April O'Neil, reactions were mixed. Some fans were excited, while others were skeptical about the direction of the movie. Much of the criticism was directed toward producer Michael Bay, who many people believed was responsible for changing beloved childhood franchises too much. Director Jonathan Liebesman, on the other hand, largely stayed out of the public debates, focusing instead on completing the film. In addition to the movie itself, the soundtrack also received attention. The film introduced a new theme song titled Shell Shocked, performed by Juicy J, Wiz Khalifa, and Ty Dolla $ign along with Kill the Noise and Mad Sonic. The energetic track was featured prominently in trailers and promotional videos for the movie. Although some fans criticized the lyrics and style of the song, others felt that it worked well as a modern, high-energy soundtrack for the reboot. Regardless of the mixed reactions, the song helped promote the film and became closely associated with the new version of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Still, it is difficult to argue that the new song is any more unusual than the many pop culture appearances the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles have made over the years. When the song Shell Shocked was finally released to the public, Paramount quickly followed it with new promotional material. The studio released several new posters along with a pair of extended television spots to promote the film, all of which featured the energetic new track in the background. Most of these promotional videos reused footage that had already appeared in earlier trailers, but there were also a few brand new shots included for fans to examine carefully. These small glimpses gave audiences another chance to see the characters, the action scenes, and the updated designs of the turtles. At the same time, Paramount also released several new posters that highlighted the four heroes in their distinctive poses and gear. One of the most memorable moments in the film turned out to be the elevator scene, which quickly became one of the funniest sequences in the entire movie. Interestingly, that scene was never originally planned in the script. Instead, it was something that happened naturally during filming and was later included in the final cut. In 2014, Paramount Pictures released the rebooted Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles film, directed by Jonathan Liebesman. The movie follows the adventures of the famous heroes in a half-shell, Leonardo, Donatello, Raphael, and Michelangelo, as they attempt to stop dangerous criminals and protect New York City from a growing threat. The film performed fairly well at the box office, earning over $490 million worldwide, which made it a commercial success. However, the movie did not receive the same level of praise from critics. Many reviewers felt that it was a flashy but unnecessary addition to the long-running Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles franchise. Because of the mixed reactions, the film even received several nominations at the Golden Raspberry Awards, also known as the Razzie Awards, which highlight some of the least well-received films of the year. The movie was nominated in multiple categories, including Worst Picture, and it was also criticized for feeling like a strange combination of a remake, reboot, and sequel all at once. Even with those criticisms, the movie still had several entertaining and humorous moments. One of the funniest scenes happens near the climax of the story. In this sequence, the villain Shredder is standing at the top of a skyscraper, planning to release a deadly toxin that could spread across the entire city. At the same time, the turtles are racing to reach the rooftop in order to stop him. While they are traveling upward in an elevator, something unexpected happens. Instead of standing silently, the turtles begin joking around. Michelangelo suddenly starts beatboxing, and his brothers quickly join in, turning the moment into a humorous musical performance. This brief scene became extremely popular with fans because it showed the playful personalities of the turtles and their strong bond as brothers. What makes the moment even more interesting is that it was completely improvised during filming. According to reports from the production team, the scene only happened because Pablo Hellman, the film's visual effects supervisor, noticed the actors joking around between takes. The performers were dancing, laughing, and having fun while still wearing their motion capture suits. Hellman thought that this playful energy showed great chemistry among the cast members. Because of that, he suggested that the filmmakers include something similar in the movie itself. Eventually, The idea evolved into the elevator beatboxing scene that audiences saw in the final film. Although the 2014 reboot was financially successful, the franchise later faced difficulties. A sequel titled Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Out of the Shadows was released in 2016, but it did not perform as strongly at the box office. Because of the weaker results, plans for additional direct sequels were eventually cancelled. Even so, the elevator scene remained one of the most memorable and humorous moments in the reboot. The franchise later paid tribute to that moment in an episode of the Nickelodeon animated series that aired between 2012 and 2017. In a Season 4 episode titled Carmageddon, one of the characters suddenly begins beatboxing in a way that closely mirrors the famous elevator scene from the 2014 film. It was a small but fun reference that longtime fans quickly recognized. Despite all the debates and criticism surrounding the reboot, some of the artists involved in the film continued defending the redesigned live-action Turtles. They explained that the goal was to create characters that would feel realistic in a modern action movie while still maintaining the spirit of the original comic book heroes. The reboot, produced by Michael Bay, may have divided fans, but it also introduced the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to a new generation of moviegoers and reminded audiences why these unique heroes in a half-shell remain so popular around the world. The film was designed as a theatrical reboot centered on the famous superhero team, bringing the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles back to the big screen for a new generation of viewers. It served as a fresh start for the franchise, which had previously included 3 live-action movies, a CG animated film released in 2007, and multiple animated television series that kept the characters popular for decades. The 2014 reboot of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles explored a slightly different origin story for the heroes. In this version, the Turtles were originally ordinary pets belonging to April O'Neil during her childhood. They were part of a scientific experiment connected to the research of her father, Dr. O'Neil, who was studying powerful mutagenic substances. During the course of those experiments, the Turtles were accidentally exposed to a special chemical mutagen that transformed them into intelligent, powerful, and highly skilled humanoid turtles. After their transformation, the 4 brothers, Leonardo, Donatello, Raphael, and Michelangelo, grew into a team of crime-fighting mutants determined to protect New York City from dangerous criminal organizations. Although 2 new adaptations of the Ninja Turtles franchise are currently in development, the 2014 reboot remains one of the most discussed live-action interpretations of the characters. The movie was produced by Michael Bay, the filmmaker best known for directing the Transformers series, and his involvement immediately drew a lot of attention. The reboot attempted to modernize the franchise with updated visual effects, redesigned characters, and a more intense action-focused style. As mentioned earlier, the film acted as a major theatrical reboot for the franchise. Before its release, the Ninja Turtles had already appeared in several forms of media, including the original live-action movies from the 1990s, the CG animated film in 2007, and multiple television adaptations. In the 2014 story, the Turtles' connection with April O'Neil becomes an important emotional element of the narrative. Because they were once her childhood pets, the discovery of their existence later in life creates a strong personal bond between April and the 4 mutated heroes. The movie starred Megan Fox as April O'Neil and featured a cast that included Alan Ritchson, Jeremy Howard, Pete Plosick, Noel Fisher, Danny Woodburn, and Tony Shalhoub, who provided the voice and motion capture performance for Master Splinter. The film was directed by Jonathan Liebesman, who had previously worked on projects such as Battle, Los Angeles and Wrath of the Titans. His goal was to bring a new cinematic style to the Ninja Turtles universe while still maintaining the core elements of the classic story. However, despite the strong visual effects and action sequences, the movie received largely negative reviews from critics. Many reviewers criticized the film for its uneven tone, excessive action, and changes to the traditional storyline. Some fans also felt that the reboot relied too heavily on spectacle rather than character development. Even so, the movie still attracted a large audience and performed fairly well financially. Over time, the film became one of the more debated entries in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles franchise, especially when it came to the redesign of the turtles themselves. Nearly a decade after the movie's release, the artist responsible for designing the turtles shared his thoughts online about the controversial look of the characters. In a series of posts, he explained the creative choices behind the design and defended his work. According to him, the intention was to create turtles that would look believable in a live-action world, while still maintaining elements of the original characters. He acknowledged that if he had the opportunity to revisit the project today, he might make a few adjustments, but he still stood by the overall vision. The live-action turtle design became one of the most widely discussed elements of the film. Many fans felt that the designs were too realistic and overly detailed, which made them look very different from the classic cartoon versions. At the same time, others appreciated the attempt to give each turtle a unique physical appearance and personality, rather than simply differentiating them by the color of their bandanas. In reality, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles franchise has always been somewhat divisive whenever it transitions to the big screen. Some fans strongly prefer the original comic books and the early animated series, while others enjoy the more modern reinterpretations of the characters. There were two major live-action attempts in recent years, the 2014 reboot and its 2016 sequel, but neither fully captured the universal praise that earlier versions of the franchise once enjoyed. Recently, however, the franchise returned in a completely new form with another animated adaptation. The animated film Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Mutant Mayhem arrived in theaters and quickly gained attention for its unique animation style and fresh storytelling approach. Unlike the darker tone of the live-action films, this new version focuses more on the personalities and relationships of the turtles themselves. The story follows Leonardo, Donatello, Raphael, and Michelangelo as they attempt to live more openly and be accepted by human society. Encouraged by their mentor Splinter, the turtles begin interacting with humans for the first time, hoping to prove that they can be heroes rather than monsters. This storyline highlights their desire to fit into the world around them while still protecting the city from dangerous threats. The result is a film that many audiences found far more entertaining and emotionally engaging than expected. The fresh animation style, energetic humor, and character-focused storytelling helped bring the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles back into the spotlight once again. The mission soon leads the turtles into a world filled with both good humans and dangerous mutants. Their biggest challenge comes in the form of a powerful and unpredictable mutant villain known as Superfly. The story quickly turns into a wild, action-packed, and often very funny adventure as the turtles struggle to balance their secret lives with their dream of becoming accepted by human society. Each of the turtles has his own hopes and ambitions about the human world. Deep down, they all believe that they deserve the chance to fit in and live like normal teenagers. Even though they spend most of their time hidden away from the public, the brothers occasionally sneak out into the city to experience small pieces of the human world. Sometimes they run errands for Splinter, sometimes they explore the streets late at night, and other times they do simple things like buying groceries, watching movies in the park, or observing other teenagers their age. All of these moments show how badly they want to experience a normal human life. During one of these outings, the turtles cross paths with April O'Neil, who in this version of the story is a determined high school reporter looking for a big story that could make her famous. When she first meets the turtles, their reaction is very cautious because they expect her to be afraid of them. However, April's response surprises them. Instead of reacting with fear, she shows curiosity and excitement. She does not see them as monsters but as something truly extraordinary. This unexpected reaction becomes the beginning of a new and mutually beneficial friendship. April quickly realizes that helping the turtles could give her the breaking news story she has been searching for. At the same time, the turtles see her as someone who might help them connect with the human world they admire so much. But their plans become complicated when they encounter Superfly and his strange group of mutant allies. At first, the turtles believe they have finally found other mutants who could become their friends. Characters voiced by actors such as John Cena, Paul Rudd, Rose Byrne, and Post Malone portray these fellow mutants, who initially appear friendly and welcoming. For a moment, everything seems perfect. The turtles feel like they have finally discovered a group that truly understands them. Unfortunately, things quickly change when Superfly reveals his true plan. Superfly's goal is not peaceful coexistence with humans. Instead, he wants to transform all the animals in New York City into superpowered mutants, creating a world where mutants rule and humans are no longer in control. This shocking revelation forces the Turtles to realize that these mutants are not the friends they hoped for. At first, the Turtles pretend to go along with Superfly's plan while trying to figure out what to do next. Eventually, the situation explodes into a massive fight between the Turtles and Superfly's mutant forces. The battle becomes chaotic and intense, and eventually the Turtles are captured by a powerful organization connected to TCRI, a secretive company interested in studying mutants for its own mysterious purposes. The leader of the organization wants to capture the Turtles and use them for experiments. Fortunately, the Turtles are eventually rescued by Splinter, who learns about their capture after April informs him about what happened. Once the team is reunited again, the Turtles realize that they must focus on their real mission. They must work together to stop Superfly's plan to enslave humanity and turn the entire city into a mutant empire. At the same time, they try to convince some of Superfly's mutant followers that they do not actually want to live in a world where humans are treated as slaves. Eventually, the Turtles manage to confront Superfly directly. At first it seems like they have defeated him, but their victory does not last long. Instead of being destroyed, Superfly falls into the ocean and undergoes an even more extreme mutation. When he re-emerges, he has transformed into a gigantic and terrifying creature, absorbing the traits of multiple animals and becoming more powerful than ever before. His monstrous new form threatens to destroy the entire city. Realizing that they cannot stop him alone, the Turtles understand that they must finally step into the human world openly and ask for help. Inspired by a powerful speech from Splinter, the Turtles and the other mutants decide to work together to save New York City. When they arrive in the city, however, they are not welcomed as heroes. Most of the people of New York still believe that the Turtles and the other mutants are dangerous enemies. With the city turning against them and Superfly becoming stronger every moment, it seems like all hope is lost. The Turtles struggle to fight back against the massive mutant monster. At this critical moment, April O'Neil finally finds the courage to overcome her stage fright and broadcast the truth to the entire city. Through her reporting, she explains that the Turtles are actually trying to protect New York and stop the real villain. Her message finally convinces the people of New York to support the Turtles. With the help of the citizens, the Turtles are able to launch one final attack against the enormous and mutated Superfly. After an intense and dramatic battle, Superfly is finally defeated, and the city is saved. The heroes celebrate their victory, and the mutants who helped the Turtles are finally accepted. In the end, Splinter welcomes the other mutants as part of their extended family, showing that even in a strange and chaotic world, unity and understanding can bring very different people together. In the end, the Turtles allow the other mutants to join them and become part of their extended family. Instead of leaving them behind, the Turtles decide that the new mutant group deserves a chance at a better life. Because of this, the family begins living together in the sewers and hidden areas of the city, creating a new home where everyone can feel safe and accepted. With things finally looking better for the new mutant family, the Turtles are able to achieve something they have always dreamed about. For the first time, they get the opportunity to attend high school and experience the normal teenage life they had always imagined. As the Turtles begin adjusting to their new life, the story reveals another twist. It turns out that they are still being secretly monitored by Cynthia Yutram, the mysterious leader of TCRI. Even though her earlier plan failed, she has not given up completely. Instead, she decides to turn to another dangerous organization known as the Foot Clan in order to track down the Turtles again. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles franchise has always had a complicated and sometimes unpredictable history when it comes to adaptations in pop culture. Over the years, the characters have appeared in comics, cartoons, toys, video games, and several different movie versions. When fans look back at the original 1990s films and cartoon series, many people remember them with strong nostalgia. However, those earlier versions were not perfect either. They had their own flaws, strange ideas, and sometimes very unusual storytelling choices. But that is also part of what makes the Ninja Turtles franchise so unique. After all, the entire concept started with a comic book about 4 mutated turtles trained in ninja martial arts by a wise rat who learned his skills by watching his owner practice. It is already a strange and creative idea, so it is not surprising that each new adaptation takes a few liberties with the story. Because of this, whenever a new cartoon, comic series, toy line, video game, or movie appears, it usually introduces new ideas and changes to the original formula. The creators of the newest Ninja Turtles movie clearly decided to push some of those creative ideas even further. Like many fans, I watched the trailer before the movie was released. At first, it didn't completely convince me. I saw the redesigned turtles, and honestly, I thought they looked a little strange. I also knew that Michael Bay was involved in producing the film, which made some fans nervous because of the dramatic changes he brought to the Transformers franchise. Still, instead of judging the movie too quickly, I tried to keep an open mind. After all, the Ninja Turtles have gone through many different versions over the years. Some were great, some were strange, and some were simply experiments that didn't work very well. So I decided to give this new version a fair chance. At the very least, it probably couldn't be worse than the infamous Coming Out of Their Shells concert tour from the early 1990s. And honestly, I also tried to set aside my nostalgia for the early 90s movies so that it wouldn't influence my judgment too much. One of the first things to talk about is the character of April O'Neil, because her role has changed several times throughout the history of the franchise. Originally, April was introduced as a lab assistant working alongside scientists. Later versions of the story turned her into a television news reporter, which became the most recognizable version of the character. In the more recent animated series, she is sometimes portrayed as a teenage student, balancing school life while helping the turtles fight crime and even sharing their love of pizza. In the 2014 movie, April returns to the role of a news reporter, although this version of the character struggles to gain recognition in her career. She wants to become a serious investigative journalist, but instead she often receives smaller or less important assignments. The first major concern many fans had came when Megan Fox was announced as the actress who would play April O'Neil. For some viewers, the casting choice felt unexpected and even controversial. Some people believed that the decision was made mostly because of her popularity and appearance rather than her acting abilities. Personally, I have never been a huge fan of Megan Fox's performances, but in this movie she actually manages to handle the role fairly well. She delivers her lines confidently and manages to keep the story moving forward during many key scenes. However, one of the problems with the movie is that the story sometimes relies too heavily on April's character to carry the narrative. In many ways, the film begins with her story and also ends with her perspective. Her introduction in the movie focuses heavily on her desire to become a respected journalist and join the big leagues of news reporting. Unfortunately, that storyline never fully develops or reaches a satisfying conclusion by the end of the film. As a result, some viewers felt that the movie could have balanced its focus better between April and the turtles themselves, giving more time to the personalities and growth of the 4 heroes. Sure, it kind of makes sense that April becomes involved in the story because she meets the turtles for the first time and discovers their secret. But after that moment, the whole news reporter storyline almost disappears. The movie briefly introduces her goal of becoming a serious journalist, but then it quickly forgets about that idea and moves on to other scenes. This makes you feel like a lot of the story could have been trimmed down. Several moments involving human characters feel unnecessary and sometimes even a little boring. Instead of building stronger scenes for the turtles themselves, the movie spends too much time focusing on characters who do not really add anything meaningful to the story. One example of this is April's boss. His role in the movie is so small and unimportant that it almost feels pointless. He cannot really be considered a cameo, but he also does not contribute anything significant to the plot either. At times it almost feels like his character is simply there to fill screen time or to give April someone to talk to in order to move the story forward. Honestly, April's boss and another supporting character could easily have been combined into a single role. Doing that would have made the story feel smoother and more focused. Instead, the movie spends unnecessary time jumping between scenes that do not really move the plot forward in an interesting way. Because the film places so much attention on April, it sometimes forgets that the story is supposed to be about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles themselves. Yes, April does help move the plot along in several important moments, but as I mentioned earlier, the movie ends up depending too heavily on her character. Now don't get me wrong, I'm always supportive of strong female characters. I enjoy seeing moments where the so-called damsel in distress proves she can handle herself and stand strong in dangerous situations. Those moments can be exciting and empowering. But in this case, the movie sometimes feels less like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles film and more like the story of a reporter named April O'Neil who just happens to be surrounded by mutant turtles. To be fair, Megan Fox actually does a decent job with the role. Her performance is solid enough, and she manages to handle most of her scenes without turning the character into something overly ridiculous. When the casting was first announced, many fans worried that the character might become exaggerated or distracting. Fortunately, that did not happen. Megan Fox avoids turning the role into something that makes the audience roll their eyes. However, while she avoids being embarrassing, she unfortunately also ends up being somewhat boring during many parts of the movie. Some of her scenes simply drag on for too long without adding anything exciting or meaningful to the story. The biggest issue appears when the movie decides to involve her directly in the origin story of the Turtles. At least the filmmakers avoided the earlier rumor that the Turtles were going to be aliens from outer space. When that rumor first appeared, fans immediately reacted with frustration. For many people, the most important elements of the franchise needed to remain the same. They are turtles, they are ninjas, they are teenagers, and of course they are mutants. So while the movie did not turn them into aliens, the new version of the origin story still ends up feeling somewhat awkward. At one point, I honestly could not keep my open-minded attitude and ended up letting out a loud groan while watching the scene. Without giving away too many details, the connection between April and the Turtles' past feels forced. It is one of those moments that makes longtime fans scratch their heads and wonder why the story needed to change something that already worked perfectly in the original versions. To be fair, the film still includes Splinter, the wise rat mentor who trains the turtles. However, this version of the character feels quite different from the classic one many fans remember. In earlier versions of the story, Splinter was calm, wise, and disciplined. He learned martial arts by watching his human master practice and eventually became a powerful teacher who guided the turtles with patience and wisdom. In the reboot, however, his story feels somewhat simplified. Instead of learning through years of observation and experience, he discovers martial arts through a book and begins training the turtles using that information. This change makes the character feel less like a legendary martial arts master and more like a slightly awkward and strange mentor figure. His personality also feels less calm and wise compared to previous versions. Visually, the character is also very different. The design of the live-action rat is extremely detailed and realistic, which unfortunately makes him look a little unsettling at times. Of course, rats are not exactly known for being beautiful creatures in real life. Still, in earlier adaptations, creators usually tried to make Splinter appear more appealing or heroic so that audiences could easily connect with him as a mentor figure. Here, the design leans heavily toward realism, which makes him look somewhat unpleasant to watch in certain scenes. While some viewers appreciate the realism, others feel it makes the character harder to enjoy on screen. Not everything in a movie needs to be completely grounded in reality. After all, we are talking about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, a story about giant mutated turtles trained in ninja martial arts. It is already a strange and imaginative concept, so trying to make every detail overly realistic sometimes feels unnecessary. One of the biggest criticisms of this movie since the very first previews has been the design of the turtles themselves. Many viewers felt that the characters could have been made more visually appealing. Instead of creating designs that looked friendly or inviting, the filmmakers chose a much more detailed and rough style for the turtles. Personally, I still believe the turtles could have been designed in a way that felt more welcoming and recognizable to longtime fans. But at this point, there is not much that can be done about it. The designs we saw in the trailers are the same ones we get in the movie. That being said, once the film actually starts, the turtles do not look quite as strange as they did in the early promotional material. I cannot honestly say that the designs completely grew on me, but at least they are not so distracting that they ruin the experience of watching the movie. One thing I can definitely admit is that the visual effects team did an impressive job bringing the turtles to life. At times I even forgot that I was watching computer-generated characters. The animation allows them to interact convincingly with real-life actors and environments. After all, this is their movie, and it is good to see the turtles finally getting the spotlight again. They get to use their signature weapons, perform exciting fight scenes, and exchange jokes with each other. The movie does make an effort to keep the personalities of the turtles recognizable. We see Leonardo's leadership, Raphael's aggressive attitude, Donatello's intelligence, and Michelangelo's playful humor. Those familiar traits help maintain some connection to the classic versions of the characters. Of course, because the film is produced by Michael Bay, the action scenes follow the typical blockbuster style. There are plenty of big explosions, intense chase sequences, and loud action moments designed for the big screen. Unfortunately, the editing during these action scenes is often extremely fast and chaotic. The camera moves so quickly that it can sometimes be difficult to understand exactly what is happening or who is fighting whom. As a result, some of the action sequences end up feeling a little confusing and overly noisy rather than exciting. In some cases, the spectacle begins to feel repetitive and slightly pointless. For some viewers, this leads to the feeling that the movie might not have needed to be made at all. Personally, if I had to rate it, I would probably give it 1.5 out of 5. If you are not a big fan of the Ninja Turtles franchise, you might honestly prefer to stay home and take a nap instead of watching it. Michael Bay's role as a producer probably explains many of the film's stylistic choices. The movie features loud, fast-paced action scenes and dramatic camera movements, along with several close-up shots of Megan Fox's character. The turtles themselves have been updated to match a more modern style, and the film tries to include a mixture of action and humor. Even though the plot is fairly simple, the movie keeps a steady pace and moves quickly from one scene to the next. However, the biggest issue is that the story remains too predictable. There are almost no real twists or surprises in the plot. In fact, the storyline is so straightforward that you could almost watch the movie with your eyes closed and still understand exactly what is happening. If you somehow fell asleep during the middle of the film and woke up 5 minutes before the ending, you would probably still be able to guess how everything unfolded during the previous 90 minutes. The original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles films from the 1990s were not perfect either. From a filmmaking perspective, they had many flaws. But at the time, they felt fresh and unique because audiences had never seen anything like them before. This newer movie, on the other hand, often feels like a familiar formula rather than something new and exciting. The villain's plan, for example, involves spreading a dangerous substance across the city using the media and broadcasting systems. While the concept works within the story, it never becomes as memorable as the villains from earlier versions of the franchise. Still, if you grew up watching the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in cartoons, comics, or movies, there is a good chance that you will still find some enjoyment in this film. Yes, the plot is simple, and sometimes the pacing feels rushed. But the actors and performers behind the Turtles do bring energy and personality to their roles, which helps give the movie a bit more heart. Despite the flaws and some questionable creative choices, the movie still manages to provide a few entertaining moments. If the filmmakers had invested a little more effort into the story and character development, the result could have been something much stronger. Even so, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles franchise continues to survive and evolve, proving that these strange heroes in a half-shell still hold an important place in pop culture. Interestingly, the franchise even once faced censorship challenges in certain countries. For example, the British Board of Film Classification, BBFC, had strict rules regarding the portrayal of martial arts weapons, even when those weapons were being used by characters dressed as giant turtles. Yet despite all those challenges and changes over the years, the Ninja Turtles remain one of the most recognizable and unusual superhero teams ever created. This loud and flashy reboot replaces the classic rubber suit look of the older films with heavy CGI designs. Somehow, though, it also ends up making its earlier predecessors feel stronger and more charming by comparison. The original films had a strange but memorable charm to them, even with their limitations. Their story was simple and comforting: mutated reptiles living beneath New York City, eating pizza, joking around, and delivering ninja justice to criminals. The 2014 film is directed by Jonathan Liebesman, but the influence of producer Michael Bay can clearly be felt throughout the movie. From the explosive action scenes to the dramatic camera angles and flashy visuals, the style resembles the kind of blockbuster spectacle that audiences have come to associate with Bay's productions. There are also moments that feel more like advertisements than storytelling. For example, the camera occasionally lingers on Megan Fox in ways that feel closer to a fashion commercial than a scene in a superhero movie. Combined with the loud explosions, frantic editing, and dramatic sound effects that resemble those used in the Transformers films, the overall experience sometimes feels overwhelming. Like many Michael Bay-produced films, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, 2014, received heavy criticism from film reviewers. Critics pointed out that the dialogue often feels awkward, and the structure of the story jumps quickly from one scene to another without giving the audience much time to connect with the characters. Another major criticism involves the film's main human character, April O'Neil. Throughout the movie, her actions often seem to cause more problems than solutions. From the beginning of the story to the final scenes, her decisions repeatedly place the Turtles in dangerous situations. In fact, some viewers have argued that April O'Neil might be one of the weakest heroine characters in modern superhero films. However, it is also important to remember what kind of movie this is supposed to be. At the end of the day, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is a story about giant 6-foot mutant turtles who are trained in ninja combat by a talking rat. When you think about it that way, expecting a deeply serious or complex story might not be entirely fair. Many people love the original Ninja Turtles movies, but those films were also very cheesy in their own way. Much of their popularity comes from nostalgia and the fun, over-the-top nature of the characters. They were never meant to be extremely realistic or serious films. Because of that, the new movie could have leaned more confidently into its ridiculous and entertaining side. Instead, it sometimes feels unsure about whether it wants to be a serious action movie or a goofy adventure. The story begins with April O'Neil interviewing a dock worker about a robbery connected to a mysterious criminal organization known as the Foot Clan. Interestingly, this opening scene feels heavily inspired by scenes from the Batman films, almost to the point where it becomes noticeable. However, the movie also seems aware of its own influences. At one point, a character even jokingly points out the similarity by mentioning the use of a Batman voice, which adds a small moment of self-aware humor. From that point onward, the movie moves quickly from one event to the next. April eventually discovers the existence of the Turtles and becomes involved in their secret world. Unfortunately, her curiosity and decisions repeatedly place both herself and the Turtles in dangerous situations. Despite the flaws in the storytelling, one thing the movie does reasonably well is giving each of the Turtles a unique personality. Leonardo, Raphael, Donatello, and Michelangelo all feel like distinct characters with their own attitudes and behaviors. Even though their personalities sometimes feel slightly exaggerated or overly goofy, each turtle still reflects the core traits that fans recognize from earlier versions of the franchise. Raphael remains aggressive and rebellious, Leonardo tries to be the responsible leader, Donatello is the intelligent inventor, and Michelangelo continues to provide most of the comic relief. April O'Neil, however, feels quite different from her earlier portrayals. In the original films and cartoons, she was often portrayed as a helpful and resourceful ally to the turtles. In this version, however, her actions sometimes cause problems rather than solving them. At one point, she even unintentionally leads the villains to the turtles' hidden underground base. Moments like that make her character appear careless and somewhat irresponsible. The filmmakers seem aware that some of these moments are ridiculous. The movie occasionally includes jokes that highlight just how strange or unbelievable the situation has become. Overall, the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles film feels like a mixture of action and comedy that frequently crosses the line into complete absurdity. Everything is exaggerated, from the explosions to the fight scenes to the dramatic confrontations. Sometimes this over-the-top style helps keep the movie entertaining. Other times it simply makes the story feel chaotic and lacking focus. The film eventually builds toward a larger conflict in New York City. Darkness spreads across the city as Shredder and his powerful Foot Clan tighten their control over the streets. Their influence reaches everywhere, from the police to powerful political figures. As the city falls deeper into chaos, it becomes clear that only a group of unlikely heroes can stop the growing threat. That is where the Turtles finally step forward to embrace their destiny. The cast includes Megan Fox, Alan Ritchson, Jeremy Howard, and others who bring the heroes to life through a mixture of motion capture performance and voice acting. For many fans, the release of this film also brings back memories of the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie from 1990. Some viewers still remember waiting in long lines at movie theaters to watch that film when it first came out. At the time, the original movie became an unexpected box office success. It captured the excitement and imagination of fans who loved the action, humor, and unique style of the Ninja Turtles universe. That success eventually led to 2 sequels and many additional adaptations, including animated shows, video games, and merchandise that kept the characters popular for decades. The franchise itself began with the 1984 comic book series, which introduced the world to the strange concept of ninja-trained mutant turtles. Over the years, the characters have demonstrated remarkable staying power, appearing in numerous television series, films, and games. Despite that long history, there was a time when it seemed like another big movie adaptation might never happen. Development projects often stalled, and plans for new films remained uncertain for years. Originally, this reboot was even intended to be released earlier, but delays pushed the production schedule further back. Eventually, Paramount Pictures, producer Michael Bay, and director Jonathan Liebesman moved forward with the project. For longtime fans, the idea of a big modern reboot felt both exciting and worrying at the same time. While some hoped it would bring the Turtles back to the spotlight, others feared that it might damage the nostalgic memories of the earlier films. In many ways, this reboot became exactly what some fans feared, a large, loud blockbuster filled with explosions and spectacle that sometimes struggles to capture the simple charm that made the original Ninja Turtles so beloved. Sure, the concept of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles has always sounded a little ridiculous when you say it out loud. After all, the idea of teenage turtles trained in ninja martial arts by a talking rat is naturally strange. But there has always been something about the way the franchise embraces that silliness that makes it entertaining. Unfortunately, in this reboot, the movie seems to work so hard to remind the audience how strange the concept is that it ends up making the whole thing feel even more awkward. Producer Michael Bay appears to have made peace with his former Transformers star Megan Fox, casting her as reporter April O'Neil after the public disagreements that led to her departure from the Transformers series. However, Fox's portrayal of April often feels more like that of a glamorous model rather than a serious investigative journalist. In many scenes, she delivers her lines in a flat and casual way, almost as if she were ordering food rather than reporting on a major news story. Her emotional reactions often feel misplaced, and at times it seems like the character is unsure whether to act frightened, curious, or determined. Because of that, April's character becomes one of the most puzzling aspects of the film. The performance leaves viewers wondering what the filmmakers were really trying to achieve with her role. It also raises questions about some of the other casting choices. Actors like Will Arnett and William Fichtner are normally very capable performers, yet their roles in the movie feel strangely underdeveloped. Their characters could easily have been played by lesser-known actors, which makes their presence somewhat surprising. Arnett's usually energetic comedic style feels muted here, while Fichtner's villainous role comes across as slightly generic. The script never gives either actor enough material to truly stand out. The turtles themselves, however, are visually impressive from a technical standpoint. The CGI animation is extremely detailed, and the characters move in ways that feel almost lifelike. Ironically, though, this realism sometimes makes them appear slightly unsettling. In the original 1990s films, the turtles were played by actors wearing rubber suits, which required a certain suspension of disbelief from the audience. But those simpler designs had a kind of charm that made the characters feel approachable. In the 2014 version, the hyper-detailed designs can occasionally make the turtles look a little creepy rather than heroic. Another issue with the movie is its overall scale. The film is clearly trying to present itself as a massive big-budget blockbuster, filled with dramatic action sequences and large-scale destruction. However, the goofy and playful personalities of the turtles don't always fit naturally within such a serious action framework. The result is a strange mix of tones that sometimes clashes rather than working together. The origin story itself also feels familiar, borrowing elements from several other superhero movies. Some plot points appear to have been lifted from previous comic book adaptations. For example, the villainous scheme created by Shredder and the Foot Clan strongly resembles the kind of citywide threat seen in films like The Amazing Spider-Man. The similarities are noticeable enough that some viewers joked that Marvel Studios might feel tempted to call their lawyers. Even though the story tries to follow some ideas from the more recent comic book versions of the franchise, there is not much in the movie that feels truly fresh or original. For viewers who are not already dedicated fans of the Ninja Turtles, there may not be much here to capture their interest beyond curiosity. Between the heavy digital effects and the redesigned version of Shredder, who now looks more like a mechanical warrior than a traditional ninja villain, the movie sometimes feels more like a late-summer action spectacle than a meaningful reboot. In some ways, it almost feels like the franchise should simply allow these teenage reptiles to graduate and move on, especially considering that many of the original fans have now grown up more than 30 years after the Turtles first appeared. Before the movie was even released, social media was filled with negative reactions to the early promotional material. Many fans expressed strong criticism of the designs and creative choices during production. Because of that, I personally decided to approach the movie with no expectations at all. I tried to clear my mind of nostalgia for the cartoons I watched as a kid and avoided reading reviews before seeing the film. Surprisingly, after watching it, I can honestly say that I found the movie fairly entertaining. Yes, the dialogue is clearly written for a younger audience than myself. But in many ways, it reminded me of the humor I remember from the cartoons and movies I enjoyed growing up in the 1990s. The jokes are simple and sometimes childish, but they capture the playful spirit that defined the franchise during its earlier years. The storyline itself is straightforward enough to keep older viewers engaged while remaining easy for younger audiences to follow. The plot may be somewhat generic, but it moves quickly and includes enough action to hold the audience's attention. There is little doubt that a new generation of kids will be drawn to this movie. The updated look of the characters and the fast-paced storytelling make the film accessible to younger viewers who may be experiencing the Ninja Turtles for the first time. At the same time, there is enough effort put into the script to make the film enjoyable for older fans who grew up with the Turtles. Of course, a more complex and carefully structured plot might have improved the movie. But adding too much complexity could also have risked losing the younger audience the film is clearly trying to reach. As a result, the movie ends up balancing entertainment and simplicity in a way that allows it to appeal to a wide demographic. One area where the film clearly succeeds is its visual effects. The CGI work is impressive, and even viewers who dislike the new turtle designs may still appreciate the technical quality behind them. Personally, I found the new look surprisingly appealing after a while. It even awakened a sense of nostalgia for the characters I remember from my childhood. Compared to the bulky rubber suits used in the early 1990s films, this version feels like a major technological upgrade. Each turtle is also given a stronger visual identity and personality, making it easier for audiences to tell them apart and connect with their individual traits. These personality differences also allow for a wider range of comedic interactions between the brothers. Although the story slows down slightly during the later part of the second act, the movie remains entertaining from beginning to end. The action sequences are well choreographed and visually impressive. Watching them in 3D adds even more depth and excitement to the large-scale moments. The fight choreography also captures some of the same energetic style that fans remember from earlier versions of the franchise. Each turtle fights in a slightly different way that reflects his personality, which makes the combat scenes more interesting and fun to watch. There is also a clear sense of ambition in the way the final battles, especially the confrontation between the turtles and Shredder, are staged. The shots are framed carefully, and the camera angles help emphasize the intensity of the action while still allowing the audience to follow what is happening on screen. The filmmakers clearly understood how to build strong cinematic moments at the right time in order to keep the story moving forward. Overall, the movie feels like a fun reintroduction to the world of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and it is easy to see why a sequel was quickly announced after its release. For many viewers, the film manages to refresh their memories of the characters they loved as children while also introducing updates that make the story feel more modern. Of course, there will always be people who criticize the movie because of their strong attachment to earlier versions of the franchise. However, when you look at it simply as an adventure film, it remains an entertaining experience, especially for younger audiences. At its core, the movie delivers a fast-paced and energetic story that many kids will undoubtedly enjoy. It had been several years since the Turtles last appeared on the big screen, and the franchise eventually returned with another animated adventure titled Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Mutant Mayhem. In this version of the story, the Turtle brothers set out on a mission to win the hearts of the people of New York City and finally be accepted as normal teenagers. Their new friend April O'Neil helps them as they investigate the mysterious activities of a strange scientist. However, things quickly spiral out of control when they discover that an entire army of mutants has been unleashed upon the city. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles franchise is something that has always sparked my interest, although I have not explored every part of its darker comic book origins. What makes this newer film stand out is its fast-paced storytelling and its ability to pack a lot of fun into a roughly 100-minute adventure. The movie balances humor, exaggerated characters, and a rebellious punk-style tone while still maintaining a sense of heart and excitement. Animation has been especially impressive in recent years, with films like Puss in Boots, The Last Wish and Spider-Man, Across the Spider-Verse showcasing unique visual styles. Mutant Mayhem deserves to be mentioned alongside those films because it brings its own distinctive look to the screen. The movie truly feels like a comic book brought to life, with sketch-like line shading, colorful backgrounds, and creative character designs for the many mutant creatures. The visual style stands out immediately and confidently embraces its artistic direction. From the chaotic first meeting between the Turtles and April to the energetic montage sequences set to hip-hop music, the film constantly delivers entertaining moments. The large-scale final battle is especially exciting and visually impressive. The soundtrack is another highlight, filled with energetic rap tracks that match the movie's youthful tone. The cast also includes many recognizable voices in supporting roles. John Cena and Seth Rogen appear as mutant characters, while the four young actors voicing the Turtles bring genuine energy and personality to their performances. Their chemistry as brothers feels natural and believable, which helps make the emotional moments of the story work much better. Ice Cube delivers a strong performance as the ambitious and power-hungry villain Superfly, while Jackie Chan provides warmth and humor as Master Splinter, the Turtles' mentor. Meanwhile, Ayo Edebiri brings a refreshing interpretation to the character of April O'Neil, giving the role a slightly different personality compared to previous versions. Going back to the 2014 live-action reboot, many fans were highly anticipating its release when it first arrived in theaters. The film was produced by Michael Bay and directed by Jonathan Liebesman, who attempted to create a modern version of the Turtle story. Updating such a beloved franchise was always going to be a risky decision because many people grew up watching the original films and cartoons. Michael Bay received a lot of criticism during the production process, especially because of some of the creative decisions associated with the project. However, it is worth remembering that he served primarily as a producer, not the director. When watching one of Bay's productions, audiences generally know what to expect: loud action, large-scale destruction, and spectacular visual effects. Because of that, it is often best to approach these films with an open mind rather than comparing them too closely to earlier versions. Most viewers are already familiar with the basic premise of the Ninja Turtles universe. The Turtles were originally created through scientific experiments involving a mysterious mutagen. After their transformation, they were raised and trained by Splinter, who teaches them the ways of martial arts and guides them as they grow into heroes. Living beneath the streets of New York City, the Turtles eventually emerged to protect the city from criminals and powerful enemies. In the rebooted story, the Turtles join forces with the determined news reporter April O'Neil in order to stop a dangerous villain who plans to take control of the city. The cast includes Megan Fox, Will Arnett, and William Fichtner, along with voice and motion capture performances from Alan Ritchson, Noel Fisher, Pete Plosek, and Jeremy Howard as the four Turtle brothers. One of the challenges when discussing this movie is avoiding constant comparisons to the original trilogy from the 1990s. Those films hold a special place in the memories of many fans. Another noticeable feature of the reboot is that it was released in 3D. Many modern films use 3D technology in hopes of enhancing the viewing experience, although in many cases it does not add much to the story itself. Michael Bay's productions often aim to make everything bigger and more spectacular, but sometimes it is not necessary to constantly try to outdo previous films. One of the aspects I personally enjoyed about this version was the effort put into expanding the backstory of the characters. The film offers glimpses into events that took place in the past and shows how those events shaped the present-day story. Although I have not read all the original comics, I do not remember the earlier films from the 1990s providing this much background information. The acting performances are generally solid, although Megan Fox sometimes struggles to deliver the emotional depth expected from a leading role. To be fair, this kind of action-focused movie does not necessarily demand extremely dramatic acting. Still, it is difficult to imagine her transitioning into very serious dramatic roles in the future. The computer-generated effects are impressive, which is not surprising considering the film's massive budget of over $100 million. A large portion of that budget clearly went toward creating the detailed CGI characters and large action sequences. One of the most exciting parts of the movie comes during the final act, when the Turtles face off against Shredder in a series of intense action scenes. For many adult viewers, the main reason for watching movies like this is the chance to escape reality for a while and enjoy a fun, action-packed adventure. For the most part, the film succeeds in delivering that experience. However, one of the film's biggest weaknesses is the casting of certain supporting characters. For example, Will Arnett is normally a very entertaining actor, especially in comedy roles. But in this movie, his character sometimes feels out of place. Many viewers still associate him strongly with his earlier comedic roles, which can make it difficult to fully accept him in this particular story. Even so, despite its flaws, the film still manages to deliver enough action, humor, and nostalgic charm to keep audiences entertained throughout its runtime. It's not really the actor's fault. The problem lies mostly with the lines that the writers gave him. Many of the jokes seem written only in the hope of getting a big laugh from the audience, but instead they come across as forced. It often feels like the character is trying too hard to be funny. Without those awkward jokes, the character would barely have any purpose in the film at all. Unfortunately, this becomes a recurring issue throughout the movie. Another predictable element appears in the character played by William Fichtner, who portrays the wealthy owner of a powerful corporation. Even before the film truly begins, it becomes painfully obvious that his character is going to turn out to be the villain behind everything. The movie never really tries to hide that fact, so the reveal later in the story does not feel surprising at all. One of the more disappointing aspects of the film is the lack of playful banter and memorable one-liners between the Turtles and Master Splinter. Those humorous exchanges were one of the most enjoyable parts of the earlier Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movies. Aside from a few pizza jokes and a couple of brief references to turtle culture, the humor in this version feels almost non-existent. The charm that once made the Turtles feel fun and lively is mostly missing. The design of Shredder's soldiers is also disappointing. Instead of looking like traditional ninjas, they resemble generic Special Forces soldiers wearing tactical gear. One of the best parts of the early 1990s Ninja Turtles films was the presence of mysterious ninja fighters. Many fans probably remember the memorable fight scenes between the Turtles and the Foot Clan ninjas in places like shopping centers or warehouses. Those scenes helped create the classic ninja atmosphere that defined the franchise. In this reboot, however, those kinds of nostalgic moments are mostly absent. I was personally hoping to see at least a few references or tributes to the original films, but the movie offers almost nothing in that regard. The pacing of the story also feels rushed. It often seems like the filmmakers quickly stitched together different scenes without taking the time to develop them properly. To be fair, the second half of the movie is somewhat better than the first. The action sequences become more intense, and the stakes of the story start to feel a bit higher. However, even the action scenes sometimes suffer from strange editing choices. For example, there is a moment where one of the turtles slides under a moving truck during a fight sequence. Instead of feeling exciting, the scene ends up looking awkward because of the way it is filmed and edited. Moments like that weaken the overall impact of the action. In the end, this reboot of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles probably did not need to be made at all. That doesn't mean the movie is completely unwatchable. It is still an entertaining enough 104-minute distraction if you simply want something light to watch. But overall, the film feels like a very predictable blockbuster with a weak story. It misses the humor and nostalgic charm that made the 1990s films so enjoyable. The digital visual effects are definitely one of the movie's strongest elements. The CGI characters and environments look impressive. Still, it's hard not to wonder whether a mixture of practical suits and digital effects, similar to what was used in the older films, might have worked just as well. Considering that the production budget reportedly exceeded $100 million, the question becomes whether the movie can truly be considered a major success. From a critical standpoint, probably not. But if you are simply looking for something to watch on a relaxed evening, it might still be worth checking out. Interestingly, the movie performed quite well at the box office despite the mixed reviews. The Turtles returned to theaters with strong opening numbers. The film earned around $65 million in its opening weekend in the United States and Canada, taking the top spot at the box office. This impressive debut pushed Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy into second place for that weekend. Despite receiving only around 20% positive reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, the movie still attracted large audiences. The film seemed to benefit from both longtime fans who remembered the 1990s movies and younger viewers who were familiar with the Nickelodeon animated series. Internationally, the movie also performed strongly. It opened at number 1 in many markets, including major regions like Russia and Mexico, where it earned millions during its early releases. Other films competing at the box office during the same period included Into the Storm, which earned about $6.5 million on its opening Friday, and the culinary drama The 100-Foot Journey, which debuted with around $3.7 million. Meanwhile, Guardians of the Galaxy continued its successful run with approximately $12 million on Friday, pushing its domestic total toward $177 million. Even with strong competition from other films, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles managed to maintain its momentum. The movie also performed well in international markets, collecting around $29 million from multiple countries during its early releases. Because of these strong numbers, the film quickly became one of the most talked about movies of that summer's box office season. While critics remained divided about the film's quality, its financial success showed that the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles franchise still had the power to attract audiences around the world. And in the end, that popularity ensured that the Turtles would continue their adventures in future films and new adaptations. In Russia, the film opened at number 1 with an impressive $11 million, performing about 13% ahead of Dawn of the Planet of the Apes and nearly doubling the earnings of the number 2 film in the market. This strong opening showed that the Turtles still had major international appeal. Meanwhile, Guardians of the Galaxy continued its global run. During its second weekend in Mexico, the film opened at number 1 with an impressive $7.1 million from 63 locations, which was actually better than expected. That result even surpassed the previous weekend's opening numbers in that market, where the movie had earned $6.5 million. Paramount also benefited from the continued performance of Transformers: Age of Extinction, which became one of the highest-grossing films of all time, reaching around $789 million worldwide after adding roughly $70 million from 58 international territories. The studio eventually released the film in its final major markets, including Japan and Spain, further increasing its global earnings. When it comes to movies like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, a certain level of suspension of disbelief is obviously required. After all, the entire concept revolves around 6-foot-tall talking reptiles trained in martial arts who also happen to love pizza. The Turtles themselves are brought to life through motion capture performances by actors such as Alan Ritchson, Noel Fisher, Pete Plosick, and Jeremy Howard, who portray the brothers Leonardo, Michelangelo, Donatello, and Raphael. Meanwhile, April O'Neil, the ambitious young reporter, begins investigating mysterious criminal activities connected to the Foot Clan in hopes of uncovering the mastermind behind the chaos. Fans of the franchise will likely enjoy seeing the Turtles return to the big screen, along with the familiar humor and playful personalities that have defined the characters for decades. The story attempts to give the Turtles a more scientific origin and even connects their past with April's personal history. However, parents of younger children should be aware that the movie still contains a steady stream of action and violence. Although the violence is mostly bloodless, it still includes weapon usage, martial arts battles, dangerous threats, and several intense moments involving explosions, vehicle crashes, and high-speed action scenes. These sequences are created using advanced visual effects technology and are clearly designed to excite fans of action-adventure movies. For some younger viewers, however, the intensity of these scenes might feel a little frightening. At the same time, the movie still presents the Turtles as heroes who believe strongly in teamwork and brotherhood. The brothers work together to use their abilities to fight organized crime and protect innocent people from powerful villains. Before continuing further, it feels necessary to include a small disclaimer. First, I am not someone who blindly praises everything associated with Michael Bay. At the same time, I would not describe myself as a strong critic of his work either. In fact, I actually consider movies like Transformers and Bad Boys to be entertaining dumb fun. I would even go as far as saying that Pain and Gain is one of my favorite dark comedies. Now that that is clear, we can talk about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles more honestly. As you probably know, the franchise is built on one of the strangest concepts in all of fiction. A rat trained in martial arts accidentally creates 4 ninja-trained mutant turtles who then go out into the world fighting criminals. The turtles frequently battle various enemies, the most famous being the mysterious organization known as the Foot Clan. Whenever a movie franchise gets rebooted, it is almost impossible to avoid comparing the new version with the earlier films. While preparing to review this reboot, I actually went back and watched the original trilogy from the 1990s, including the often forgotten third movie. Looking back, the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, 1990, film still holds up surprisingly well. It presents a strong theme of family, balancing action scenes with meaningful character moments. The portrayal of Splinter in that earlier film is especially memorable. In the cartoon series and older movies, Splinter is calm, wise, and deeply connected to the Turtles as their father figure. In this newer film, however, Splinter feels somewhat different. Instead of the wise mentor we remember, he sometimes appears stricter and less emotionally connected. One of the most powerful scenes in the 1990 movie shows Splinter speaking gently to Raphael, warning him that his anger will ultimately destroy him. The emotion in that moment adds depth to both characters. Moments like that helped establish the strong family bond between the Turtles and their mentor. Unfortunately, the reboot does not capture that same emotional warmth. Another disappointment is the portrayal of Shredder, the Turtles' greatest enemy. In any story, a strong villain is essential to creating an engaging conflict. In earlier versions of the franchise, Shredder was a mysterious and intimidating ninja leader. His presence alone made him feel dangerous. In the reboot, however, Shredder becomes a more mechanical character. His armored suit looks more like a high-tech weapon system than the traditional ninja armor fans remember. Because of that, the character ends up feeling somewhat one-dimensional. It also seems clear that William Fichtner's character may originally have been intended to play Shredder before changes were made during production. After earlier controversies about casting decisions in Hollywood, filmmakers may have wanted to avoid having an Asian character played by a non-Asian actor. As a result, the story shifts in a way that feels slightly awkward. The villain's plan itself also feels rather typical. Like many comic book movie plots, it revolves around a large-scale scheme designed to threaten the entire city. Ironically, the final battle even resembles the ending of The Amazing Spider-Man, making the movie feel somewhat derivative of other superhero films. Another strange issue is the relationship between April O'Neil and the Turtles. The movie attempts to create emotional connections between them, but those moments sometimes feel forced. At times, the Turtles themselves almost feel like supporting characters in their own movie, appearing mainly during fight scenes rather than driving the story forward. Some interactions between the characters even create slightly uncomfortable moments. For example, one turtle becomes overly fascinated with April, which leads to jokes that feel a bit awkward. Despite these issues, the movie is not completely without redeeming qualities. One of the most impressive sequences takes place during the mountain chase scene, which is easily the highlight of the entire film. The combination of CGI, stunts, and action choreography works extremely well in that moment. That sequence demonstrates how computer-generated effects can be used effectively to create action scenes that would be impossible to film in real life. Unfortunately, that mountain sequence stands out because the other action scenes are not nearly as strong. Many of them rely too heavily on shaky camera movements and extremely close shots. When the camera zooms in too much during a fight scene, it becomes difficult for the audience to understand what is actually happening. Traditionally, close-up shots are used during emotional or dialogue-driven scenes so viewers can clearly see the actors' expressions. But during action scenes, the camera should usually pull back slightly so the audience can follow the movement and choreography of the fight. When that rule is ignored, the action becomes confusing rather than exciting. And in some ways, the final confrontation of the movie feels so familiar that it almost seems like the filmmakers borrowed the ending from The Amazing Spider-Man. Yes, that's absolutely correct. For a movie that builds toward a huge climactic battle, the final fight scene surprisingly lacks the impact that audiences usually expect from such a moment. Great superhero movies often deliver unforgettable finales. Think about the final battle between Spider-Man and the Green Goblin in Spider-Man, 2002, or the famous hallway fight scene from Kick-Ass, 2010, or even the scene in X-Men where Nightcrawler single-handedly attacks the White House. Those moments stay with the audience because they are powerful, carefully choreographed, and emotionally engaging. Unfortunately, the final battle in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, 2014, never reaches that same level of excitement or creativity. While the acting throughout the film is not particularly impressive, I would actually place more blame on the writers and the director rather than the actors themselves. After all, actors can only perform as well as the material they are given. Even though Megan Fox is not generally considered one of the strongest dramatic actresses, she has worked with talented directors before and delivered decent performances. In this case, however, the script simply does not give her enough strong material to work with. Another major issue with the film is the feeling that the creative team approached the project as if it were strictly a children's movie. Because of that mindset, it sometimes seems like the writers and directors believed they didn't need to put as much effort into the storytelling as they would for a movie aimed at adults. Some critics focused heavily on the character designs of the turtles themselves. Personally, I don't think the designs are as bad as many people claim. In fact, the visual differences between the turtles, such as their body shapes and facial details, help give each character a more distinct identity. However, the movie does suffer from weak cinematography. Camera movement can be very effective when used properly to create tension and excitement. But in this film, the camera often moves far too much. The constant shaking and quick cuts make it difficult for the audience to clearly follow what is happening on screen. Instead of enhancing the action, the camera work often distracts from it. This problem becomes even more noticeable because of the extremely bright lighting used in many scenes. The intense lighting combined with frantic camera movement makes some moments visually overwhelming. Ironically, one of the film's best scenes, the famous elevator scene, works precisely because it avoids these problems. In that moment, the camera remains relatively steady, allowing the audience to simply relax and enjoy the interaction between the turtles. Scenes like that prove that sometimes the best approach is to step back and let the characters carry the moment instead of constantly trying to create excitement through technical tricks. In many ways, kids deserve a better movie than this. Entertainment for younger audiences should still be created with care and effort. The stories and characters children experience often shape the way they see the world as they grow older. For example, many people develop interests and values during childhood through the movies they watch. Personally, some of my early environmental awareness came from watching animated films like Princess Mononoke and Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, which told powerful stories about humanity's relationship with nature. Movies aimed at young audiences have the ability to inspire curiosity, compassion, and creativity. Because of that influence, filmmakers should take their responsibility seriously when creating entertainment for children. When a film is seen by millions of young viewers, it becomes more than just entertainment, it becomes part of their cultural experience. Of course, Michael Bay did not actually direct this film. His role was that of a producer. In Hollywood terms, that can sometimes mean offering creative input while allowing the director to handle most of the filmmaking decisions. However, because Bay's name is the most recognizable one associated with the project, many people naturally blame him for the movie's problems, even if those problems are not entirely his responsibility. That's simply the way modern media discussions tend to work. Interestingly, movies like this also highlight something about modern culture. News media often focuses on dramatic controversies while ignoring many issues that truly matter. If the media were genuinely focused on informing the public rather than chasing ratings, discussions about movies like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles might be more thoughtful and balanced. Instead, the public conversation often becomes exaggerated and overly emotional. Eventually, though, the reality is simple. This movie is just another remake of a franchise that has existed for decades. The Turtles themselves originally appeared in comic books, later becoming popular through cartoons, video games, and earlier films. Over time, the franchise has been rebooted again and again. For some longtime fans, these constant remakes can feel frustrating, especially when the newer versions fail to capture the charm of the originals. At the same time, each new generation of viewers discovers the Turtles in their own way. Years ago, the franchise even released an animated film simply titled TMNT, which many fans enjoyed. That movie had a unique visual style and seemed like it might lead to additional sequels. Unfortunately, the animation studio behind it eventually shut down, and the series never continued in the way some fans had hoped. Looking back even further, the first live-action Ninja Turtles movie started strong before the sequels gradually became stranger and more exaggerated. The second film famously introduced a musical performance by Vanilla Ice, and the third movie took the Turtles into a time travel story set in feudal Japan. Whether those movies were good or bad, they still had a certain charm that made them memorable. Today, the franchise continues to evolve through new films, cartoons, and games. Some fans embrace these changes, while others remain loyal to the earlier versions they grew up with. And that is probably the true story of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, a franchise that constantly changes but somehow continues to survive in pop culture. Even if every new version is not perfect, the Turtles always seem to find their way back onto the screen. I honestly never expected to think about April O'Neil in the way this movie presents her. In the earlier cartoons and films I grew up watching, that thought never even crossed my mind. April was simply a reporter and a friend of the Turtles. But in this movie, the character is presented very differently, and it creates a strange and somewhat confusing feeling for longtime fans. The film takes a character that many of us remember fondly from childhood and suddenly tries to transform her into something else entirely. It raises the question, why change something that was already working? Why take a character people loved and reshape her in a way that feels unnecessary? This isn't meant as criticism toward people who find the character attractive. Everyone has their own opinions about fictional characters. But the point is that April O'Neil was never meant to be defined by her appearance. In the original stories, she was a smart, determined journalist who helped the Turtles uncover criminal conspiracies. Her intelligence and courage were what made her important to the story. Naturally, this decision leads to her first encounter with the mysterious mutant turtles. This moment becomes the accidental event that sets the entire plot in motion. In fact, if April had behaved like a cautious and responsible journalist, the entire story might never have happened. That said, I don't want to sound completely negative about the film. There were a few moments that genuinely made me laugh. The Turtles occasionally deliver some humorous lines, and the character voiced by Noel Fisher in particular provides several entertaining one-liners. Even though most of the jokes are fairly simple, they still manage to work within the context of a movie primarily aimed at children. However, evaluating the movie from an adult perspective is a different matter entirely. While the film may contain a few entertaining moments and impressive visual effects, it doesn't offer much depth beyond the standard elements of a typical action-adventure story. The movie includes familiar plot devices such as a ticking clock scenario and several large action set pieces. One of the biggest sequences involves a dramatic chase down a snowy mountainside. While the visual effects during that scene are impressive, the moment surprisingly lacks a real sense of danger. The excitement feels somewhat artificial, similar to the large barrel sequence in the Hobbit films. Another strange issue with the film is its uncertain tone. At times it feels like the movie is trying to capture the playful spirit of the original cartoons, while at other times it seems to be aiming for a more serious blockbuster style. The Turtles themselves still maintain some of their classic traits, including their famous love of pizza, although those moments are not emphasized nearly as much as fans might expect. Even their famous catchphrases and slang expressions are used sparingly. In some ways that is actually a good decision, because overusing those elements might have made the movie feel even more childish. The film's production also connects to other projects being developed by Paramount Pictures, including additional animated adaptations that aim to expand the Ninja Turtles universe. If I were a bit younger, I suspect I might have enjoyed this movie much more. At a certain age, the combination of action, humor, and colorful characters would probably be very appealing. As it stands, I don't believe I have completely outgrown the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles franchise. However, this particular adaptation feels like it is trying to appeal to too wide an audience at once. Because of that, it never fully commits to being either a children's adventure or a more mature superhero story. As a result, it becomes difficult to feel strongly invested in the film one way or the other. The movie's story once again returns to the idea of a mysterious mutagenic origin, connecting the Turtles' transformation to scientific experiments and the past of April O'Neil and her father. The narrative introduces a powerful businessman who secretly manipulates events in New York City while working alongside the dangerous Shredder and the criminal organization known as the Foot Clan. Through a series of conspiracies involving experimental chemicals and corporate control, the villains attempt to carry out their destructive plan. The screenplay itself remains fairly conventional, following a predictable structure with familiar action movie beats. Unfortunately, the director's approach to editing and pacing, especially during the opening act, does not help strengthen the storytelling. Instead of building suspense naturally, the movie repeatedly returns to April as the central narrative focus, which ultimately slows down the early part of the film. In the end, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles feels like a movie that is trying to satisfy many different audiences at the same time. On one hand, it clearly wants to attract younger viewers who are discovering the Turtles for the first time. On the other hand, it also attempts to appeal to older fans who grew up watching the cartoons, movies, and playing the video games. Unfortunately, trying to please everyone at once sometimes prevents the movie from fully committing to a clear direction. The result is a film that delivers action, humor, and visual spectacle, but rarely reaches the emotional depth or storytelling strength that the franchise once had. The visual effects are certainly impressive, and the Turtles themselves are brought to life with detailed motion capture performances. Their personalities are still recognizable, and the bond between the brothers remains one of the strongest elements of the story. However, the movie often shifts the focus away from the Turtles and onto the human characters, which makes the heroes feel like secondary figures in their own film. The villains, especially Shredder and the Foot Clan, also lack the depth and intimidation that fans remember from earlier versions. Even so, the movie still offers moments of entertainment. There are exciting action scenes, a few humorous exchanges between the Turtles, and some nostalgic references that longtime fans may appreciate. For younger audiences especially, the film can still be an enjoyable adventure. The colorful characters, fast-paced action, and simple storyline make it easy to follow and entertaining for viewers who are experiencing the Ninja Turtles for the first time. For older fans, however, the experience may feel more mixed. While it is fun to see these characters return to the big screen, the movie does not always capture the charm and emotional warmth that made the original films and cartoons so memorable. Ultimately, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, 2014, is a modern blockbuster adaptation that relies heavily on spectacle rather than storytelling. It is loud, visually impressive, and occasionally funny, but it rarely rises above the level of a typical action movie. Still, the franchise itself remains incredibly resilient. For more than 3 decades, the Ninja Turtles have continued to evolve through comics, cartoons, movies, and video games. Whether through nostalgia or new adaptations, these unusual heroes in a half-shell continue to find their way back into pop culture. And no matter how many times the story is rebooted or reimagined, one thing remains the same. For brothers, trained in the art of ninja combat, fighting together to protect their city and prove that even the most unlikely heroes can make a difference.